Good evening and welcome to the Burbank Police Commission regular meeting for Wednesday, November 15th, 2023. And we are going to go ahead and start with a call to order. Ms. Nakamura?
Chair Coons,
Present?
Commissioner Chapman,
Here.
Commissioner Ellman,
Here.
Commissioner Feruzin is not present, Commissioner Hakobian,
Here.
Commissioner McKenna is absent, and Commissioner Wenzel. Here.
Wonderful. So let's go ahead and rise for our flag salute, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I was going to ask Commissioner McKenna to do that this evening in recognition of Veterans Day, but he is representing us at the NACOL conference right now. Good evening, glad you're here. All right, so before we move forward, for our public comment, to speak during public comment, members of the public may speak for 3 minutes in person in the council chambers, or they may call 818-238-3335. Members of the public who are attending the meeting in chamber will speak first, followed by those phoning in their comments. And at this point, we're going to move on to item C, and this is commission announcements and reporting out by commissioners and ad hoc subcommittees. And if it's okay, we'll just kind of work our way around the horn. Roman,
Sure.
you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair Coons. First, I'm going to give an update on our Traffic Safety Committee report and then some community engagement. Our Traffic Safety Committee, consisting of Chair Coons, Commissioner McKenna, and myself, is working with the Department's Patrol Division, the Burbank Armenian Association, the Anti-Street Racing Group, Together We Can, on a driver safety campaign with car dealerships in the city of Burbank. The campaign will begin with 8 dealerships in our city. The campaign will feature the following: a trifold brochure with driving safety statistics and financial impact used at car dealerships during point-of-sale transactions between dealerships and their clients, a 22 by 17-inch driver safety poster to be displayed at dealerships and businesses supporting the Burbank Police Department efforts. And also, additionally, in the future, an event centered on driver safety will be organized at one of the dealerships. And we just want to thank the department, participating partners, and our council liaisons for all their support. Councilmember Mullins, who's here tonight, has been a great thought partner throughout this campaign, and I mentioned that she'll report on the work that the Traffic Safety Committee is doing at a future council meeting. So thank you. And also for reporting on community engagement, today I had the honor of attending the Matthew Pavelka plaque reveal. Really wonderful turnout, such a heartfelt dedication to an incredible officer, and the Burbank Police Foundation did a great job of putting that together, so thank you for the invitation. And then on Saturday, October 21st, I attended the 50th anniversary of the Burbank Historical Society, and I saw some friends from the community there, and that's all I have to report.
Thank you, and in particular, thank you for the work on this campaign. It's really exciting what we're creating, and it's also reflective of what we can do, some things that we can do as a commission, so thank you for that. Leila, do you have anything to report out on? No? Okay. So I'll go ahead and report out. I was able to attend the Pavelka plaque unveiling this afternoon as well. It was a somber and it was a powerful event, so just really appreciate being there with everyone. And for everyone, there were a lot of hands that put this event together and this memorial together, so I really appreciate everyone that did that work. I also wanted to report out on, I had an assignment to myself, and I did some homework reviewing some past minutes from meetings. Before I joined the commission, it was in January 2020 that the use of body cameras was on the agenda. So for those of you that are looking for it, January 2020 is when you will find information on the last time there was a formal review of body camera usage and policy with the department. There was a subsequent, about 2 years later, when we had the presentation on tasers, I believe it was I want to say it was in January of 2022, was when there was a discussion on policy of tasers. And the reason it's specific here is because that was another point when we were talking about the use of body cameras, body-worn cameras as well. So it has been a minute since we've specifically focused on that, so we may want to consider that later on. And that's all I have to report out on. Mike?
I too made my way over to the memorial and saw the flagpole and the memorial. It's been 20 years since Officer Pavelka died, and it's almost odd that tonight it's raining outside, the same as it was 20 years ago that night. I am very happy that the Police Foundation took the time to honor Pavelka, and I'm wondering if we could adjourn our meeting this evening in his honor as well.
That would be fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, I call this a work in progress time for me. I had a meeting that was just rescheduled with State Assembly member Laura Friedman's Burbank liaison. They specifically, it's an old friend of mine, and specifically want to talk about grants that they can go after in the name of school safety. Have no idea what that might look like, but that meeting has been put off till just after Thanksgiving. The second thing that I did is I'm continuing to talk to one of our moderate to severe special education teachers about the design of some type of an ID larger than a school ID. This was recommended by a parent in August at the night walk. Something that young adults, students who have just graduated, students that are in the FACS program might wear even at a store or something that will identify them as perhaps special ed or requesting assistance. So we're in that progress. Also have yet to, but something else that I was thinking, and that is that we have a lot of people, I don't have a number, in our community who do not speak with language, but speak with American Sign. And when I went out on my drive with Officer Campos, something had come over, and there were comments that the person only signs, who can go, but maybe develop something, I don't know who would pay, but develop something for police officers to have, perhaps in their car. But it would be maybe a picture, signs that say, I'm a police officer, I'm here to help, something like that. So
Great.
I just started talking to people about things that might be of interest to me to follow up on and
Perfect.
include others, for sure.
Thank you.
This afternoon, I also attended the Matthew Pavelka ceremony at Johnny Carson Park, and it was a very moving event, and kudos to the Police Foundation for putting it on. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right, so with that, we will move to actually oral communications. This would be the public comment period. Thank you. I was looking at the agenda item. I got myself confused for a moment. So this is where we're going to open up oral communications. I don't know if we have anybody in the audience that wanted to speak today. Okay. Do we have any callers?
We do not, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So we will go ahead and move on. So there's no commission response to public comments. Are there any emails that folks had received that they wanted to respond to? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. So the next item that we have is item F. It's approval of minutes from October 18th, 2023. So hopefully folks have had a chance to review that, and what we will need is we will need a motion and a second to approve those minutes. Mike Chapman, Big Mike.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Great, thank you,
I
Mike.
second.
And Romick seconds, and all in favor? Any opposition? Any abstentions? I'm doing the math in my head. 5 in favor, no opposition, 1 abstention. And we're glad that you're back with us tonight, too. All right. So we will go ahead and move on to items of business. So item number 1 is the presentation, discussion, and recommendations, if applicable, of the recommendations presented in the Racial Identity and Profiling Act, RIPA, annual report, specific to Burbank Police Department. And I believe we have Lieutenant Brimway with us. Lieutenant Brimway, welcome.
Good evening, Police Commission. Lieutenant Emil Brimway with the Police Department. I'm currently our Professional Standards Bureau Lieutenant, and part of my duties is being the manager of the RIPA program for the Police Department, which stands for Racial Identity Profiling Act, as you are all aware. If we could start the slideshow, please. So, AB 953, if I get this to work. also known as RIPA, was introduced by the California State Legislature to help end racial and identity profiling. The bill required all law enforcement agencies in California to collect perceived demographic and other detailed data regarding pedestrian and traffic stops. The Burbank Police Department began collecting data in 2022 based on the size of our organization. Veritone is the application that the Burbank Police Department uses and has contracted with to capture the information. So a smartphone type device is used by police officers. Every time they have a contact with a community member, they upload that information and all the required data required by RIPA into the system. When officers clear their radio calls, they've been advised to state RIPA at the end just to ensure that the RIPA entry has been completed by the officer. Once that's completed, a supervisor then does audits and reviews the RIPA entries with the officer's logs to confirm that the information that's been captured is accurate. Date, time, location, what kind of stop it was, what the outcome of the stop was. Once that's completed, the supervisors then approve the submitted RIPA by the officers. Then I look at it just to double check and make sure that all the information is accurate before I submit it to California Department of Justice, which then it's reviewed by them to ensure accuracy. The RIPA Board, Advisory Board, is appointed by the California Department of Justice, Office of the Attorney General, as they have the primary oversight over the RIPA Board. The RIPA Board includes 17 members, which include members of the public, law enforcement, and educators. At the direction of the legislature, their charge is to eliminate racial and identity profiling, improve diversity, and improve racial and identity sensitivity in law enforcement. Their function is to analyze the data that's provided by law enforcement to the California Department of Justice. They publish annual reports in regards to their findings. They analyze law enforcement training, and they make policy recommendations for eliminating racial and identity profiling. They also work with state and local law enforcement agencies to analyze departments' policies to see if any changes should be recommended in regards to RIPA. Before we get into any questions in regards to the recommendations, the 12-page document that you all wanted us to review today, I'm going to first go into our department's policies and procedures as far as how we operate in regards to RIPA. So our police department's mission is to protect life and property, provide professional police services, and work in partnership with the community. So protect life and property. The Burbank Police Department policy manual is over 1,000 pages. We use Lexipol for our policies. Lexipol is a gold standard in law enforcement nationwide as far as ensuring departments are following all state, federal laws, and what they call best practices, which goes above and even beyond what state and federal law requires. So we're constantly updating our policies, ensuring that we are up to par, above and beyond with our policies and procedures. The Burbank Police Department encourages officers to promote community engagement through traffic and public safety by conducting traffic stops and consensual encounters. We all know this. I believe the commission would know this. Traffic complaints is the #1 complaint and has been for the city of Burbank by community members. It has been since I started here. Traffic complaints in regards to traffic safety continue to be the #1 complaint to the police department. And we do everything we can to address those complaints through enforcement and through education. We continue to work with the community to promote traffic and public safety. Many of you may be aware of Vision Zero. It's a nationwide campaign, and the goal is to get 0 fatalities per year in every city. And again, that's through traffic safety, traffic enforcement, working with the community. Our Traffic Bureau conducts education at local schools, community events, and different forums in regards to traffic safety year-round, and the police department takes a proactive enforcement stance when it comes to traffic safety. It is an organizational priority to develop supervisors who mentor and supervise officers in the field. Supervisors are responsible to be out there with the officers, ensuring that they're up to date with their training, up to date with policies, and making sure that they're doing good work out there as they're being supervised by the sergeants on the field. That falls on the lieutenant, the watch commander, to ensure that his or her supervisors are out there engaging with the community, engaging with the officers as they're engaging the community. The police department also has a very robust audit processes. Officers are audited daily by supervisors on every single shift. Those include audits of their RIPA entries. It includes body-worn camera audits. It includes in-car camera audits. It includes what we call a community response survey, where supervisors will randomly reach out to a citizen that's been contacted by the police to see how that service went with the police officer, but also how it went with the dispatcher who originally took the call. That's completed randomly. The police officer nor the dispatcher knows when their turn's going to come up for that. So that happens at the patrol level. We also have our audits and inspections unit, where in particular to RIPA, they conduct multiple audits year-round on RIPA to ensure that we're in compliance. Officers are doing what they're supposed to do in regards to those requirements as it pertains to RIPA. Going into different review boards and community engagement for the police department, as you all know, we have the Office of Independent Review. It is a separate entity from the police department. It's a civilian oversight board that we've had for many, many years. Their function is to review complaints, uses of force, any and all bias, race-related complaints. All of them are reviewed by the Office of Independent Review, amongst many other different audits and inspections that they do. Then they complete the annual report, which then they present to you all and to the City Council. You yourselves, the Police Commission, I'm assuming all of you have been on ride-alongs with the Police Department. Some of you have been on multiple ride-alongs. I highly recommend that you guys continue all asking to go on more ride-alongs. We're absolutely open to that. We want to be engaged with you. We want you to be in our police department and go on these ride-alongs. It's important for you all to see what it is that we do out there or what the officers do out in the field. The Commission on Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies, CALEA, we continually get certified with CALEA every 4 years. Every 4 years, they review 400 standards of the police department to ensure that we're in compliance. Beside that 4-year review annually, they review 100 standards every single year, and they select the standards that they want to review. And we have to make sure that we produce all the necessary documents to show that we're in compliance. Social media, the Community Academy, as you're aware of, and different community events that the police department's involved in. Our personnel complaint process is very robust. It's very detail-oriented from the moment that someone files any type of complaint against any of our personnel within the police department. Our complaint forms are available in English, Spanish, and Armenian. We have them in the city clerk's office. We have them on our display rack at the police department. We have them at the front counter. Every single supervisor carries it with them and has to be available at any time if anyone asks to file a complaint on any one of our members. Disposition notifications are sent out to all complainants, and it's not a one-way street. So at the bottom of those complaint forms, the commanding officer's information is on the bottom. So any citizen who receives a disposition of their complaint it's a two-way communication. They can speak to the commanding officer and explain or discuss any concerns that they have in regards to the finding or the investigation itself. Everything is captured, automated with the police department when it comes to complaints, and per statute, all of our complaints are completed within 1 year. More so, whether it's interviewing witnesses, contacting the complainant, our Internal Affairs Bureau, or whoever the chief designates to conduct that investigation, pretty quickly they're reaching out to any citizens, any witnesses, any officers involved, the complainant. That's not something that sits there for any length of time. It's completed in a very thorough and efficient manner. Also, OIR reviews all of our use of all of our complaints as well, or most of our complaints, but specifically our bias-based related complaints. So just some quick stats. In 2023, we had nearly 87,000, 2022, I'm sorry, we had nearly 87,000 public contacts. Of 87,000 public contacts, we had 23 citizen complaints. 87,000 contacts, 23 complaints. 3 of those complaints were bias race-related complaints. All 3 of those complaints were investigated per the chief by our Internal Affairs Bureau. All 3 of those complaints included review of body-worn camera, in-car camera, possibly traffic camera, any witnesses possibly involved, obviously interviewing the complainant, interviewing any and all officers that were present, any witness officers, and so on. At the conclusion of all 3 of those investigations, all 3 of those complaints were found to be unfounded, meaning the allegations were not true that were alleged. So to put it in perspective, 87,000 contacts 2022. If you total all of our 23 complaints, that's 0.00026% of our contacts. And if you narrow it down to the 3 bias race-related complaints, it's 0.00035% of our total contacts with the community in 2022. So as I mentioned, if you want to take a look at that as I continue to speak here, so again, OIR reviews all of our race bias-based complaints. And in reviewing our 2022 complaints, some of the comments that they made was that our Internal Affairs Bureau used genuine thoughtfulness in their process, and that they went above and beyond the paradigm of you stopped me because of my race versus no, I didn't. They've also recommended our complaint process and how our Internal Affairs Bureau conducts race bias-based complaints to other law enforcement agencies as a model for other agencies to use. And a big thing for that is that they believe, based on what they read, is that we move beyond the isolated incident to assess a larger sampling of the subject officer's activity in conducting such stops. What that means is when our Internal Affairs Bureau receives that complaint, they don't look at that one incident. They conduct further research into that officer's or those officers' other contacts with other community members to see if there's any kind of pattern of practice by the police officer. It's not just interviewing that one complaint. They go above and beyond. So my final thoughts before I open up to questions or any comments you may have in regards to the recommendations by the RIPA board. I just want to touch base again as far as traffic and public safety being a priority for the police department. Priority for our community. We listen to our community as far as what their concerns are, as far as feeling safe in their homes, their properties, and traffic-wise. Again, we have a robust policy and procedure system with over 1,000 pages of policies. Again, we use Lexipol, which is the gold standard for policies. Body-worn cameras, in-car cameras, and traffic cameras are reviewed on every single audit the police department conducts, on every single complaint by a complainant that comes into the watch commander to our Internal Affairs Bureau. We review everything. Our supervisors are continually trained to supervise their officers. That is their job, to be out in the field, again, to engage the officers, to engage the community, and ensure that the officers are following best practice, policies, procedures, federal and state law. A couple of recent trainings that we all completed was tactical communication through post. All departmental members have completed that. Another training we recently completed was race and bias-based policing training as well. Again, all police employees have to complete those trainings to be in compliance with post. Just to reiterate one more time, our audits and inspections, both at the patrol level as a reminder, and then our audits and inspections unit, continually exercising and ensuring that officers are following all policies and laws and rules. And then again, our Internal Affairs Bureau does a great job with tracking complaints. They're always looking for patterns. Is there a pattern with an officer or officers in regards to the types of complaints that are coming in? And that's something that is addressed by the police department if such a pattern is noted or found. And finally, again, OIR is our civilian oversight committee that we continue to use and will continue to use to whether you want to call it constructive criticism or whatever it is, to make us as good as we can be as a police department. So with that, I am now going to open it up for any questions that you may have in regards to the recommendations by RIPA.
I appreciate that. The presentation, questions on the presentation are fair game too, correct?
Oh, yes,
Great.
sure.
Wonderful.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Any questions you have about anything?
Thank
sure.
you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, almost anything, but here we go. Let's open it up. Do folks have questions? Let's go ahead,
Simple
Ann.
question. You mentioned the complaint forms. Are they also available online?
Yes, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
good.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking. Yes, they're available on the Burbank Police Department's website. You can submit a complaint online anytime from anywhere. Yes, you can also do that. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Other questions that folks have? You want to jump in? Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
I've got several questions. One is that our policy, you mentioned that it's a long read.
Sure.
But also the RIPA report was a long read. It was like 200 pages for the full report. When you mentioned Kalia and the electrical, are all of the suggestions that are in the RIPA report showing up in our policy currently?
No, so Lexipol, we follow Lexipol strictly. Again, best practices. No, that they do not. The recommendations from the RIP Advisory Board does not match exactly what our policies are.
In the report, the RIPA report, they had gone through and given a number of suggestions. Could you maybe mention a thing or two of items that we didn't feel was necessary to include in our policy?
There's multiple recommendations.
Yeah.
So
I know.
give me an example of one I don't know. I mean, I could go down a laundry list if you want me to, but it'd be better if it'd be more specific of what the question is.
All right.
If I may, just to offer this, because one of the things that we were thinking about in preparation for this presentation, we originally talked about the RIPA report, I believe it was in January, if I recall, when we talked
Yeah.
about how the department was going to be responding to RIPA. We're bringing it back to talk about it and have the presentation this evening. RIPA is going to be one of the tools that statewide is going to be used for a long time, and so if we have, now's not the only opportunity to ask questions. We'll be able to bring this back in the future. So I want to put that out there to make everybody comfortable that this is something that we'll probably be coming back to on a regular basis. So I just wanted to throw that out there for you.
And don't get me wrong in the understanding, some of the things I questioned about their
Sure.
RIPA suggestions, and one of the things was some pretext stops, I suspect, but maybe you could fill in a little bit more, is useful in going another step farther in finding weapons or something that is illegally being carried around in the car or something else is going on. How does that impact you? Are we limiting our pretext enough that we're having a negative impact on our efficiency?
Our police department stands as a proactive role in policing and conducting traffic stops. Our officers are trusted to go out there, enforce traffic laws, make traffic stops, and where those traffic stops lead them investigatively is on a case-by-case basis. But our officers have not been instructed to limit and not stop certain violations for any particular reason.
When we have, within RIPA, at what point in the stop does RIPA kick in? If you pull somebody over, is it when you start talking to one of our officers talks to a person, or the person does not have to be charged, is that correct?
No, absolutely not. So something as simple as a consensual encounter needs to be documented. So if you're standing anywhere and I walk up to you and say, "Hi, I'm Lieutenant Emil Brimway, how are you? What's going on?" That's a contact. Any traffic stop where there's a detention, there's an arrest, there's a RIPA entry. Anytime a police officer turns on their lights for any violation, there's going to be a RIPA entry. Has to document that contact. On a bicycle, on a pedestrian, someone in a motor vehicle, there's going to be documentation of that stop through RIPA.
So it's whenever an officer comes in any kind of contact with an individual.
Yes.
No matter
Well-
what the results are? or what-
Well,
what-
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure, of course. So if an officer, if we get dispatched to a call for service, a report call, and we just go take a basic report and no one was detained there, no one was handcuffed, no one was searched, then one is not needed. But anytime we put our hands on someone, we search them, we handcuff them, we do what we call a curbside detention, ask them to sit on a curb, write them a citation, arrest them, those are times that we would do a RIPA entry.
Asking questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We've been collecting the RIPA information we started in 2022.
Yeah.
And I know that when we talked in January, it was too early to have any statistics. Are there any statistics available? And are they available to the public, like on a website or something? What kind of information we've collected?
Sure. So just for me to have been all the way up to date, yesterday I contacted my counterpart at Cal DOJ, California Department of Justice, and spoke to him on the phone yesterday. And right now, they're behind about a year or two on the data that they put out. So he could not even give me a time window of when the 2022 data would be published as far as all the RIPA contacts. So we're still waiting on that from California Department of Justice. So that's at Open Justice, I can't remember the website, but if you Google Open Justice DOJ, you'll be able to find the link for that. But they are behind right now with publishing. They're the ones that collect, analyze the thousands and thousands of stops, and then they're going to provide that information to the public.
Rather than our department directly?
They're the ones that collect the data, so they're the ones that are going to push out that data initially. Then we're going to analyze it ourselves and go through the data as well at that point.
And I think my last question here is, when the determination is made for a person's profile, is that made by the officer, made by the individual?
It's made by the officer. So many times, as you guys have all been on ride-alongs, when you're behind a car, a lot of times you don't even know the race, the age, the gender. You don't know that information until you walk up to the car. But that perception is perceived by the officer as soon as possible. So was it perceived before the traffic stop was made, or was it perceived when you walked up? But you cannot legally ask them any type of question. You cannot use their driver's license to verify their age. It's got to be your perception without using actual data from the individual.
And there's no way that you can confirm that with the party that you've stopped, huh?
You're not supposed to ask them anything. No, you can ask for their driver's license, to issue them a citation, to give them a warning. Now you're going to see, maybe you're going to still make an assumption based on the last name maybe, or now you're interacting with them, but you cannot ask them, are you any nationality, any race, how old are you? If you have their license, then of course you know what their age is because you can look at when they were born or where they live and so on.
Good. I appreciate your answers here. I would, farther down the road, like to see the statistics as soon as they're available. And as well as finding out information about suggestions that RIP had made that we declined to follow through with.
Okay, I'm open to answer any of the questions. So if anyone has any questions specifically to any of the recommendations to ask me, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. But as far as, Sherry, if we could maybe, we'll get the link to them for the Open Justice, where you guys can all monitor to see when that data does come out. You guys can periodically check it, or once we learn that it is out, we can make a notification to you all, so then you guys can review it as well through the
Excellent.
Department of Justice's website. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and like I mentioned before, I think we're going to be coming back to this on time and time again, because this is a part of policing in California now. Romik, I think did you have any
Thank you,
questions?
Lieutenant.
Thank you.
I missed that. Okay. Layla, would you like to? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
course.
for your presentation
Sure.
and being here tonight. So a couple of things. One, just, in reviewing the recommendations around the complaint process. You know,
Sure.
was good to hear from you what that process looks like and see that most of it aligns with all of the recommendations here. So that's really great to see. I had a few questions about some recommendations. Like you said, there are so many, so I'm going to try to be specific, but not exhaustive. So what are, there are some recommendations here about changing sort of the threshold for certain types of stops, right? So to a probable cause threshold versus kind of, I guess, discretion. So I'm just wondering, there was one around, prohibiting specific types of enforcement actions traditionally allowed in the absence of suspicion or probable cause, such as consent searches and supervision searches and adults, and then it also specifically called out for youth. So I was just wondering, does that, what are the department's views on that? Is that part of our policy? Are we not following that policy that
Sure,
recommendation right
sure.
now?
Well, it's not a policy, and we have to be reminded, it's not state or federal law. They're just a recommendation of
Yeah.
the 17 members. So the police department, I want to keep it as simple as I can. So we have, the lowest level threshold is reasonable suspicion,
Okay.
right? A crime has occurred, is occurring, or is about to occur. An officer cannot go just simply on a hunch. An officer has to be able to articulate it. A reasonable officer has to articulate that they believe a crime has occurred, is occurring, or is about to occur. Probable cause is needed to arrest someone, that you've confirmed that a crime has been committed. Consensual encounter is not a detention. The police department continually engages the community through consensual encounters, and that's something that we're going to continue to do. When an officer conducts a traffic stop on a vehicle for speeding, tail light out, pick any violation, when officer witnesses that violation, that officer now has reasonable suspicion to pull that car over. A lot of people use the word PC. I had probable cause to stop the car. Probable cause is not needed. The threshold is reasonable suspicion that there's a violation and we can stop that car. The police department continues to enforce traffic laws, continues to conduct traffic stops based on reasonable suspicion. We continue to engage the community with contacts, consensual encounters. And one example I'm going to give that I personally experienced and witnessed as a supervisor is, unfortunately, we have a large unhoused community, not only here in Burbank, LA County-wide, countrywide. And they're sitting somewhere. And people walk past them like they're not there, unfortunately. I myself have done it. I've witnessed my officers do it as a supervisor, and the expectation is individuals are contacted. How do I know what their mental health situation is? What resources do they need? Do they need housing? Do they need mental health help? Do they need the MET team? If my officers don't go out there and engage the community and contact unhoused members, for example, they're going to be sitting there. The way that works is through a consensual contact. If we tell our officers, don't contact anyone, don't do anything, that's going to limit our engagement with the community. If we want to continue building trust with the community, my officers should feel comfortable contacting community members, speaking to them. You see a child at a store with a mom, at a restaurant, I don't care. The officers should be comfortable to go speak to those individuals. So we do those. We do traffic enforcement. I can't even put a number on it. If one of my traffic officers or patrol officers makes a traffic stop on a vehicle for speeding, during that 10 minutes, 50, 60, 80, 100 cars drive by. And what do they see? They see a traffic stop, they slow down, they think twice before, I don't want to get pulled over and I don't want maybe a $200 or $300 ticket now. Those other motorists don't know if the officer is going to give a warning, education, or write a ticket. The discretion's up to the officer. But we don't know how much that affects safety, and we believe it dramatically affects safety. So we want our officers to be out there. We want them to be present. We want them engaging the community. We want them conducting traffic stops because, again, traffic safety is the number one concern in this community. So at this time, we continue to do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Another question is around, stops, and you alluded to this a little bit, stops that are, maybe not of a high concern for public safety, right? So there's speeding is one thing, right? Or racing, clearly those are really big public safety issues and have had a really big impact on our community, unfortunately. And then there's other things like a taillight, right? So, you know, is there any thought in the department about reducing the number of stops or eliminating stops for those things? Or I understand that in many cases, maybe officers aren't actually writing tickets for those things, just kind of pulling people over, advising them, you know, to remedy the issue and so on. And/or is there an opportunity to, I know it requires funding, but an opportunity to have some sort of like voucher program, right? So if folks get pulled over for things like that, to not just, you know, do the, you know, advisal or whatever it is, but to provide them with a voucher to be able to, you know, fix the issue with their car. Because in a way, you know, I think a lot of the folks, some people just, you know, they don't care, they're not paying attention, you know, their taillight's out, fine.
Sure.
But for some people, and, you know, it can be a financial issue, right? They just, they're putting off any kind of car maintenance and many other things, unfortunately, due to, you know, lack of financial means.
Sure.
And we know a lot of, you know, as you said, there are many unhoused folks in our community. There's a lot of folks struggling with housing affordability. We had folks on strike for months, you know, so all these things. So just wondering if there's an opportunity there.
Sure, that's a good point. We'll take that into consideration in regards to the voucher program. That is a good point. I'm going to go back to the beginning and try to answer your first question. So as far as traffic enforcement, so to give you an example, our last fatality was someone making a left turn and not seeing someone in a crosswalk. And to some people, that might not be a major concern. Now, in that case, unfortunately, we had a fatality, but those are violations we need to stop. I'm going to give you an example of this weekend alone. We arrested 4 different individuals from 4 different traffic stops for possession of firearms. If my memory serves me correctly, I believe 3 of them were for expired registration and 1 was for taillight out. 2 or 3 of those guns were ghost guns and 1 was an unregistered firearm. That was from the city of Burbank. Just this weekend alone, we took 4 guns off the street for what some people call a minor, let's not make traffic stops, for example, for an expired registration. This weekend alone in Burbank, we took 4 guns off the street, which none of us in this room are going to know how many lives that potentially saved. So based on that example right now, and many other examples that I could bring up, in the last year and a half, we've taken 120 guns off the streets. 86% of those guns are unregistered ghost guns or prohibited possessor, and those came from traffic stops. So that is the work that our officers are doing when they make traffic stops. We need to remember every traffic stop that is made, there's no 2 similar situations no matter what you stop the person for, right? So you can't make comparisons. You don't know where that traffic stop is going to lead you, whether it's going to be a warning, getting multiple guns, drugs, whatever it may be. So right now, we continue to enforce all laws that the California Vehicle Code allows us to. An example I'm going to give you guys is recently the state legislature changed not crosswalks, but jaywalking. They took that away. And so when the state decides to act and change laws or remove them, then of course we're going to comply with that. But if the state legislature has a vehicle code book this big and their expectation is that law enforcement can go out there and enforce those laws, whether it's through education, through writing citations or what have you, that is the expectation, and the same goes for the penal code, for the health and safety code, and so on. So I don't know if that answered. I know it's like multi-part, but if I missed anything. Earlier you mentioned supervision release. Something that the public may not be aware of is if I'm in prison and I have a 5-year sentence for armed robbery, and the California State Parole Board, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation says, Emil, you've done 3 years, we're going to release you 2 years early, but with the understanding that we're allowing you back in society to do good, but understand that if a police officer ever stops you, because we are choosing to release you early, you have to submit yourself to a search at any time. And I understand recidivism rates and all that stuff. I understand that's a major problem. I totally do. But unfortunately, individuals that are on parole, when we do search them, we do find whether it's guns or drugs on them. Again, that's an agreement between the state and that individual. We're just enforcing the laws. So I know the board is stating, don't do supervision searches, but the agreement is I'm getting out of prison 2 years early with the understanding and expectation that a police officer can search me or my home at any time.
Okay, and my last question, don't want to take up the whole time here, is a bigger picture question. So, understanding that the data will be coming out at some point next year, hopefully, right? And that the annual RIPA report is not going to focus on any given department, right? Because it's a statewide effort. I'm just wondering if the department has any plans internally to do an analysis on the RIPA data for the department once it's sort of finalized and made public. And if there is a plan to do that, would it be just internally? Would like an external partner be brought in as well? And would it be made public? That's kind of a...
That's going to be the chief's call. We do have our audits and inspections unit, but that would come at the direction of the chief.
So we have no working plan right now until we see the data. The initial report that we have reviewed, there were biases in that report, and I've chatted with folks about that before. There were inaccuracies. We as a department have corresponded with the board and only got one response, acknowledging that there is problems. So until we see the report, to see what the data is, then we will do an evaluation. We're probably going to bring everything to the Police Commission as far as an opportunity for Police Commission to review and discuss. And most likely, I don't know how it's going to look, but we'd put it on the website to be transparent. The report's going to be available to all anyhow. So the centerpiece of your question is, do we have a plan? Not yet, till I see what it looks like. When I say me, the department, what it looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Leila. Any other questions, Leila? Okay, Mike, we'll go to you, and then I'll wrap up.
To continue on with the data. So the system works by the officers basically collect the data. It's sent to the DOJ in Sacramento.
Yes.
They-
Eventually, yes.
They have a database, they analyze it, they produce reports.
Correct.
Do we in Burbank, your department, ever get to see the raw data without analysis?
We haven't received one yet for me to know what the data, I believe, it's going to just plug in whatever the gender is, the age, nationality, ethnicity, and so on, what the disposition was a person arrested, and so on. I think it's going to provide all the information that we use the Veritone app. The Veritone app we use is in compliance with the state. So we ensure that we capture every category that they require for us to capture. My expectation is that they're going to provide us, kind of vomit it back to us, all those details of all those traffic stops in that year, to include all of that.
But since it's data,
Uh-huh.
how you analyze it can be done different ways.
I guess the question a little bit is,
yeah.
once you put it into Veritone, are you all able to pull your own reports as well?
No.
Versus, once the state has it, they do release a raw, what you call it, a raw data set on the site. Anyone can go and download it. But to your point of how are they cleaning it or verifying it or those kind of things, I guess is a question. So
Well, I'm going to trust, as I submit all of the RIPAs to DOJ, my expectation is that they're going to be thorough and accurate in the information that they put back to us. My expectation of my officers is that they're accurately documenting what they're supposed to do. And we have audits in place and processes in place to ensure that that is happening. That's all I can control at our level. What they end up giving us back, my hope is going to be, if we put in 30,000 entries of whatever we stopped, we're going to get a breakdown of the options that were given for gender, for ethnicity, for dispositions of stop. My hope is it's going to be accurate of what we get back from them. but I don't control their systems. We use Veritone, we submit it to them. We have no access to Cal DOJ as far as manipulating or messing with that process at that point.
And my last question is the complaint form. Once the form is handed in, what's the food chain as it goes through the department?
Sure. So to make it very simple, online you can obviously do it, but let's say I'm the watch commander and an individual comes into the front counter and says, I want to speak to the watch commander. I want to file a complaint for bias-based policing by one of your officers. I feel like I was stopped because of whatever the individual's race is. Our policy, we are obligated to accept that complaint form. We will have them fill it out. If they cannot fill it out, we will help them fill it out. We will fill it out for them as they speak to us. Once that complaint form is filled out and handed to either a sergeant or a watch commander, if there's a watch commander on duty, the watch commander should be handling that, not a sergeant. Sergeant should notify a watch commander. Once that's accepted, it is immediately memorialized on what we call a watch commander log, describing exactly what the complaint was. We put out a chief's memo that goes up to the command staff of someone who came in and filed a complaint based on bias-based policing and so on. Then that complaint form gets shot up to the chief of police through chain of command, and then the chief of police reviews that, and the chief of police determines who is going to do the investigation. From my experience, specifically, because we're talking about RIPA, anything race bias base, the chief is going to assign that to the Internal Affairs Bureau, not to a sergeant or a watch commander who does complaints once in a while, because we want a thorough, detailed job done and ensure it's done absolutely right. The chief will assign it to the Internal Affairs Bureau, and then the chief is constantly updated, and then I'll give it to the chief.
Yeah, don't get hung up on the phones, because we'll have folks come in and they're angry at something. They don't want to fill out a form. They talk to the watch commander, and they'll do an intake process. So it'll be memorialized. Everything we're talking about is memorialized on a body-worn camera. So if there's a problem with data that was inputted by an officer, and when we cross-staff it with the body-worn camera, that's a way to verify, authenticate. Same with the intake process, whether they fill a form out, they don't fill a form out, they don't want to fill a form out, we will do it. We do telephonic complaints. We do online complaints. They have online forms, and then I get online complaints. Officer Smith and Jones were rude to me the other day, and I'm upset. Online complaint. That will ultimately be converted into a formalized investigation, and the IA process will move forward. If there's a claim for damage, and we received one today, someone did not make a complaint, but in the claim alleged that he was falsely arrested and the officers did an illegal search. Those are allegations of misconduct. Didn't make a complaint, we initiated the complaint. So the complaint process is very robust here. Going back to OIR, OIR does a deep dive on all of this. They're attorneys, they're analytical, they're exhausting, but they do a good critique of our process. And if we fall short, and they make a recommendation, we will correct it. Just to a little off topic, is what Lieutenant Brimway was referring to is our response letters to an IA. So once the investigation is completed, we will send a letter to the complainant or complainants, and we will actually take great depth and breadth is explaining what the circumstances, what the allegations were, and what the investigative process was, what the outcome was, and if you are still concerned, there's a command officer point of contact to follow up. So that's where, because typically most agencies will do a 1.5 paragraph form letter and be done with it. And if you're on the receiving end of that, it's tough to choke down. Ours are, we have kind of set the gold standard on those response letters. All this is related. All of it is related as far as RIPA, the recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ann, go ahead.
I promise. One thing that I would hope would come out of all of this, and that that is probably part of our job, is to have a very good public understanding of two things. One, there's a lot of complaints often in terms of RIPA. Oh, the police, they don't, a lot. We know that. We see it in the media. Second, traffic stops can often lead to police officer injury, etc. And third, I've learned a lot tonight from your report, and I think that understanding can really lead to better communication, better job work, and that is understanding from the get-go. How can RIPA, where does RIPA begin? Okay, and in terms of an officer, and I think that is, I learned a lot from your report. In terms of suspicion and all of that. You know, you can't see in the car who really is there. So I think that education should definitely come out of all of this, and thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm really appreciating the conversation. I hate to drag it up, but I want to do it a little bit more. I'm really comfortable in the fact that this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and I'll get to why in a moment. I also found myself pulling out my driver's license because I realized I didn't know what data was actually on my driver's license. And aside from the picture, there's no reference to racial or ethnic identity in that and everything. So I just wanted to lift that up. And I didn't even know, and I keep it in my pocket. So there's a number of things that you'd address that I appreciate, and this topic is so much deeper and so much broader, and it really captures a lot of what we've been working on with the commission. I'm appreciative of the fact that we had addressed this in January. It's coming back now. I'm fairly confident that we're going to be coming back to this on a regular basis. I wanted to touch bases on a couple of different things and kind of tease a couple of things out. Can you? We've gotten presentations on the Why'd You Stop Me program. We're aware that this is a law. This is a law that law enforcement is accountable to follow just the way traffic laws are. You're enforcing traffic laws. So this is a law that our law enforcement agencies are responsible to enforce of themselves, if you will, to capture the data. I was wondering if you could touch bases a little bit and differentiate between. You've already talked about the law and following the law. You've touched on training, and you've talked about an accountability structure to hold officers accountable for doing their job and everything. Can you spend a few minutes specifically with this, talking about the connection between the training and the accountability piece? It's going to reiterate a little bit,
Sure.
But it's to tease out how the training's developed and how it's used to hold officers accountable.
Sure. So policy 402 of our policy, our bias-based policing policy, strictly prohibits any type of bias-based policing, period. You cannot stop someone because of their gender or their ethnicity or what you perceive them to be. That cannot be a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So we have policies in place for that, which individuals can be in trouble with, right? We obviously have state law that prevents that as well. Officers know that. A couple of trainings, again, I'll bring up. Specifically, one is our bias-based policing training that all department members just went through. And that's continual, that's ongoing, that doesn't stop. And I know I keep repeating myself, and the chief is going to be upset with me, but we
And
have
I
1,000
asked you as
pages.
well,
It's okay.
so it's okay.
We've got 1,000 pages of policies.
Yeah.
My officers, not verbatim, but their job is to know those policies. Their job is to know the law. Their job is to know what it is that they can legally do, what they are not allowed to do per the law or per department policy. So we have continual training on bias-based policing specifically, amongst many other topics. But that's what keeps us grounded, is what does our policy tell me? What is my policy state? Supervisors are always looking for patterns. That's their job as supervisors. If they witness or see a pattern, it's their job to address it and make notifications upward. I understand, absolutely. There is concern in our country when it comes to bias-based policing. I'd be very ignorant to stand here and tell you that's not the case somewheres. I can only speak for my police department here. And a couple examples, small examples, are those statistics. The amount of complaints that we get based on 87,000 contacts and how many of those are race-related, then reviewing body-worn and doing all those things. I understand there is a problem throughout our nation. There's no doubt about that. That'd be ignorant to say, nope, everything's being done perfectly and there is no race-related issues. Absolutely there is. but I can speak for my police department. I can speak as a professional standards sergeant, as the manager of the RIPA program. My job is to investigate any misconduct I observe, any patterns I observe. I review every single RIPA that comes to me before I send it to DOJ. So we have policies, protocols, procedures in place here to ensure our officers are doing the right thing. And if they're not, that's not going to be good for them. But we prevent it from getting to them doing anything like that. Can we please pull up the slide one more time? So we were talking about, or you mentioned, I'm sorry, about officers getting hurt, making traffic stops and things like that happening. So I'm going to give you one more statistic here. So out of 87,000 contacts we had with the public in 2022, we had 74 use of force. Our use of force policy is much stricter, much more detailed than many other agencies in the area. You push someone, that's a use of force. You just put someone on the ground and they're not injured, that's a use of force. You're reporting that to a supervisor, it's going up the chain, it's be a use of force investigation. Every officer there is writing reports, documenting what they saw, smell, heard, whether they were physically involved or not. Of those 74 use of force, 6% of them were as a result of a self-initiated activity or traffic stop by a police officer. So 5 of 74 in 2022 out of 87,000 contacts or 88,000 contacts were as a result of an officer pulling over a car, seeing someone walk down a dark alley in the middle of the night to inquire, we've had business break-ins there, what's going on here? Overwhelming majority of our use of forces are calls for service. And I understand, and again, maybe elsewhere, I can only focus on Burbank because this is where I'm at. Again, there is problems elsewhere that need to be addressed. The argument is that these minor traffic violations lead to deadly encounters. 87,000 contacts, none of those are deadly encounters. This year so far, we've had 44 use of force. Only 6 of them of the 44 were related, which is 13%. But a number that I'm happy to see, and I know the chief is happy to see, is we went down from 74 to 44, and we only have 1 month left in the year. And we, on average maybe 1 use of force every 2 or 3 weeks. So we're going to be well below the 74 of last year. So that's a big trend downward. I'm glad you brought that up because it reminded me of this slide, is that, and maybe elsewhere that's happening, but that is not happening in Burbank. So the 17 members have made recommendations for the entire state of California, for every single law enforcement agency in every single county. And so what we have to do is analyze ourselves, self-reflection. How are we doing business in Burbank? Does Burbank need to adopt these recommendations? And the statistics don't show that. Or at least not all of them. We do follow some already as it is, even before the recommendations, like our complaint process probably goes above and beyond what the recommendations are. But yeah.
Great. Couple more comments,
Sure.
and then I'll jump over to you, Mike. So the data, just to confirm, the 87,000 contacts.
Yes.
Are there specific contacts in there that are required to report data into the Veritone system, or is it all 87,000? There's RIPA data that's captured and needs to be entered into the system.
That's total contacts.
Right.
So calls for service, a lot of those do not require RIPA entries.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a total of all of our police officers in 22 just interacting, dealing with people,
Okay.
dealing with the community.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the total number. So the RIPA
Yeah.
number, to give you an example, this year, about 20, I would say, please don't quote me, 23,000 about will happen in 2023 in regards to RIPA contacts.
Great.
And the other ones don't apply to a RIPA contact.
Perfect. The reason I asked that, 23,000, you're talking about 23 complaints, 3 bias race complaints, but of those 23,000 contacts where data is being entered, that's data that's going to be analyzable down the road. So
Sure.
it's not just a matter of somebody complaining about a situation. We can actually take a look over time at looking at trends in the data of all of those 23,000 contacts. And that's a good thing to help us collectively learn. So I just wanted to
Sure.
lift that up, and I appreciate that.
Of course.
Real quickly, and I know that I addressed this in the in our commissioner report out. Body cameras come up again and everything. If you could clarify for me, because it'll help me with this and it'll help me with that other thing. Is there, in these contacts, so let's take the 23,000 contacts, is there a way for an officer to either mute or turn off their body-worn camera with those contacts?
They can, yeah,
They
of
can.
course, you can, of course
Okay.
you can.
And-
But, okay, go ahead.
And if I recall,
Sure.
I think when body-worn cameras are turned off, that's something that's actually reviewed somewhere in the chain of command, I think. And there are questions as to why the camera was turned off. Am I recalling that correctly?
Sure, so so we have an audits and inspections unit that does multiple body-worn camera audits per year.
Okay.
Reviewing literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of body-worn cameras, in-car cameras of officers. That is exactly what that individual is looking for. Beyond that, our patrol sergeants, every single week, every single supervisor is reviewing body-worn cameras of officers on their shift. Randomly selected. The officers don't know when they're going to be selected, and that stuff is reviewed. If there's an issue, that is something that will be addressed with the officer. Why did you mute it? Why did you turn it off? That's not something the sergeant that works for me, who does our audits and inspections, recently did a body-worn camera audit, and there was nothing noted, and it took him weeks to complete it, because you're watching maybe 15 minutes or maybe an hour worth. So we have processes in place to be proactive, to ensure that we're not waiting for a misstep. We're not waiting for the complaint. We don't want to be behind the ball. We want to catch it before something becomes a pattern. There's specific rules in our policies that say there's times where you shall not turn it off and there's times when you can. But I'm going to tell you from my experience, there is no pattern of officers randomly muting. If they're having a sidebar conversation and they're not in contact with a community member, and you can see it on the camera if they're dealing with the community, there's times when they can. But I'm going to tell you, when I was a sergeant, when I was a watch commander, I told my officers, we're not doing anything different today than we did before 2018. Don't mute it. As a watch commander, 99.9% of people, community members, that called to complain to me, my personal experience, and when I reviewed body-worn cameras for hours and compared it to what the community member was complaining about, 99.9% of Emil's experience as a watch commander was that the community member wasn't being truthful about what had happened. So we have tons of whether it's the officer cursed at me, the officer called me this word or that word, no muting, no nothing. The video goes all the way through the entire contact. The officer walks away. And then when I call them back, 50, 60%, and I'm not kidding, will hang up on me because they're embarrassed. And then the other ones will kind of mumble jumble a little bit, and then eventually we'll get off the phone.
And again, I appreciate that there's
Of
other
course.
programs that help address this as well.
Yeah.
This may be asking for a little bit more of a candid response, so I don't
Sure.
know how far you can go with this.
I'm very candid.
We're talking about a structure and a system. We're operating on policies and procedures.
Sure.
We're operating based on state law.
Sure.
So there's a command and control element. We've talked about that. Your expectation of officers. What are officers' reactions to abiding by all of these policies? What is their comfort level in what's the word I'm looking for? Earnestly implementing and abiding by these policies. Is there any? Are you experiencing any pushback?
No pushback. The biggest anxiety is change itself, no matter what it is. When I was put in this position 6 months ago, it was anxiety for me. I don't know it, I need to learn it, I need to master it, and that's okay. So I think it's growing and changing, right? I think that's all it is. As far as doing it, we have nothing to hide. I mentioned before 2018, we got our testing body-worn cameras. I was one of the beta testers of the other body-worn camera that we didn't go with before we went to Axon. Before that, I told my officers, I go, you just keep doing what you're doing. This is going to protect you. 100% it's going to protect you. Go out there, do the right thing, you have nothing to worry about. No issues. In regards to RIPA, it was just one more thing to learn. One more device that they have to carry, one more thing that they have to voice on the radio, right? RIPA, at the end of their traffic stops. We wanted to make sure that they're doing it, they're being reminded to do it. So I think it's just change, right? And once people get used to, I think it's human nature, once we get used to it, then it becomes second nature. I think it's going through the training, the anxiety of, I don't know it, I'm not used to it, the fear of it. but once you learn it, it's okay. But no, personally, me, having heard officers complain about it, not like it, has not happened with me, no.
Great. Last comment and question from me is differentiating pretextual stops versus the supervision searches that you had mentioned. We're really not talking about pretextual stops because our officers are stopping people based on a violation of the law. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So there's no even that hunch that something may be going on. There has to be some sort of a violation that's identified. Correct?
We need reasonable suspicion
Okay.
to stop someone. Now, reasonable suspicion doesn't always mean a vehicle code violation. Based on an officer's training and experience, he's working at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Magnolia Park has been hit 1 million times, 1 million businesses there, high-end shoes, clothes. What, 6 million, I don't know. But you know what I mean? So an officer may have reasonable suspicion to contact that individual
Right.
who's 3 in the morning.
Right.
He's walking down an alleyway. That's that officer's duty. And listen, pretty quickly, the officers know that's just a citizen going for a walk at 3 in the morning in an alley, in an area where there's businesses that are always broke or
Yeah.
that get broken into occasionally. And my officers'
Good catch.
jobs, my expectation is that the officers are going to go out there and speak to someone at 3 in the morning in an alley
Yeah.
because that's their job. And the moment they realize there's nothing, you walk away now. The problem becomes if you're extending something beyond what you should when you shouldn't. And when that complaint comes in and I watch a 20-minute video and I'm like, hey man, at minute 6, minute 3, this person should have walked away. Explain to me why you detained them for another 15 minutes. That is our job. That is what we do if that happens.
And you're also differentiating between the 87,000 versus the 26,000 that are reported into RIPA. And you
yes.
just teased out another piece about the body camera piece, so I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the supervision search, the reason I wanted to bring that up is
Sure.
because we're not in the business of going out and just looking for people that are on probation, that have been released early. We're finding, I want to just make sure that I'm clear, we're finding that in the context of the stop. We're not, is that correct? Or are we actually looking for people that are under supervision for
So-
an early release?
So anytime who is released out on parole, the state notifies that law enforcement agency, we have someone who's, for whatever crime, is being released out on parole in your community.
Right.
Provided with the address, photo of the individual, their criminal history. Our investigations division can go out and do a parole search of that individual anytime that they choose to, if they can. Same with probation as well, because that is what they have agreed to themselves and submitted to themselves with that understanding. As far as traffic stops go, consensual encounters, if it leads to knowing that someone is on parole or probation with search conditions, then the officer has the right to search that individual. But no, I mean, I don't, unless I know someone who's on parole or probation, when I'm driving to make a traffic stop, I don't even know who I'm stopping until I walk up to that car and I get their license.
Right.
And if I do a records check, then I see that they're on parole or probation.
Right.
Or a lot of times, parolees are required, when they are stopped by the police, per their parole officer, they shall notify police in any public enforcement contact that they're on parole. So that's how we typically, overwhelming majority of the time, that's how we learn of it, from themselves, or if we conduct a records check, that's how we learn.
But are we proactively going out and looking
No.
for folks that are, okay,
Oh, no,
perfect.
no.
That's what I
Yeah.
figured, but I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that was clear.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
sorry.
I really appreciate this.
Of course.
I think, Mike, you had one more question?
When you were talking about the statistics for use of force.
Yeah.
One thing that came to my mind, and it's just one of those strange things that come in my mind, is the majority of the use of force that there is a connection with there's a possibility, mathematical possibility that the preponderance is people under the influence?
Of our 74 use of force, or the 5 that were as a result of a traffic
The
stop?
74, that there's a better chance that use of force can happen when somebody's under the influence.
I'm going to tell you from my experience, a lot of times individuals that we get into use of force with, I cannot give you an exact number, but either under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or alcohol and or drugs. Typically, those are individuals that we get into use of force with for the 74, but I don't have a number for you
And-
of what the percentage is.
And I will add, I believe we're planning on if we haven't already, I believe we're planning on agendizing that for January. So when we do the DUI review, so
Yeah,
we'll get there
and
when we get back.
when we do that, we'll distinguish as far as categories of use of force as type 1, 2, 3, and the majority of use of forces are going to be type 3, and then we have a de minimis force category, so that we have transparency as far as how we memorialize any physical contact intervention with the subject.
Great. I appreciate that because also if Ms. O were here, she probably would have cut us off on that conversation. So I really appreciate you being here. We appreciate you. Any other questions from the commission or actually, you know what? Give me 1 second because I think I wrote down, let me find my notes.
That can't be it.
Huh?
That's not it.
So I have a couple of I just want to throw out there as recommendations as we wrap this up and everything for this item. And there's nothing that we have to vote on, but one of the things that I heard you say, Lieutenant Brimway, is the value of ride-alongs. It's really an opportunity. Some of the things that we've been talking about, it's really a wonderful opportunity to be able to go on those ride-alongs, to interact with the rank and file, to be able to have some of these conversations. Really appreciate your being candid and your perspective and your experience on this. And as a commission, we have the ability to go out and we can do, I even heard President Biden say it earlier tonight, we have the ability to go out and trust but verify.
Sure.
And which is kind of our job, which is what we're supposed to be doing. So I'm really going to encourage folks to do the ride-alongs. The second piece is I got to admit, I'm actually looking forward to the next conversation on this. It's an act. It's going to be ongoing. So I know we'll be coming back to this in the future, whether it be looking at strict data or looking at training really issues or looking at how policy is developed. So I really appreciate this partnership to get into this. And the last thing I want to just lift up is what we're doing right now is really, this is where we have an opportunity as a commission to hold the department accountable and to help the department develop in its policy by asking the hard questions. So I just appreciate all the commissioners diving into this conversation as well. So with that, any other last comments on this item? All right, we'll move on, and you're off the hot seat, so I appreciate
Thank you.
you.
No problem.
Lieutenant
Anytime.
Brimway.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on to the second item, which is a presentation, discussion, and recommendations, if applicable, on trends of domestic violence with respect to mental health, substance use, and coming out of the COVID pandemic. And we have Sergeant Marshall Lawfer. Sergeant Lawfer, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. As Mr. Coombs mentioned, my name is Marcia Lawfer. I'm a sergeant with the Burbank Police Department. I'm in charge of the Domestic and Family Crimes Unit within the Investigation Bureau. And as part of my assignment, our detectives in my unit handle the domestic violence cases. May I please have my PowerPoint? Thank you. So, to answer a question that was previously brought up regarding domestic violence incidents as they relate to alcohol and drug use, and also how we have done since the COVID pandemic, I have some statistics for you here. These bars represent our total number of domestic violence incidents as reported per year. So the first blue bar represents the year 2018, the orange is 2019, and so on through 2023. So you can see that we had a higher amount in 2018, and also in 2021 we had a little bit of a spike. To kind of give you a comparison, I took a 12-month number from the height of COVID to compare to these previous years that we had. So I took the stats from March of 2020 through March of 2021 just to give you a comparison. And we had a total of 197 documented incidents of domestic violence. So when we compare that to our previous, or the other 6 years, 2018 through year-to-date 2023, you can kind of see how that stacks up. And if we take those years and we extract the data for the reports that documented that there was drug or alcohol use that preceded the domestic violence incident, you can see there how they relate to the total number of domestic violence incidents. The total number of domestic violence incidents are represented by the blue lines, and the corresponding red bar next to it is the number of domestic violence incidents for that specific year, that where the report specifically documented that drugs or alcohol were involved. And then underneath those year numbers, there's a percentage there. So for the year 2018, 32% of our reports documented that drugs or alcohol was involved, and continuing down. And then that last blue and red bar is representative of that 12-month window during the height of COVID. So you can see how it does compare to the rest of our years. Now, I do want to just explain the caveat that the red bar is what is documented in the police report where drugs or alcohol are involved. And that is either determined based on an obvious factor that the police are going to see when they come on the scene. They might be able to visibly tell that the person is intoxicated. They might see multiple beer cans or wine bottles lying around. They might smell alcohol on someone, or someone might admit that they were using drugs or alcohol. If it wasn't apparent to the officer and the people involved denied that drugs or alcohol were involved, then it will indicate that drugs or alcohol were not involved, even though they could very well have been. So I just want to explain that caveat to our information here. Just as a resource for anybody who may be watching, if they are victims of domestic violence or they have someone in their family that is affected by this, there are some resources listed here, and there's also some QR codes so that people can easily access that information. We also have resources available through the department. Anytime that we encounter someone that either is reporting domestic violence or they are involved in another incident and we believe that domestic violence may be a factor, they are given a card as a handout with different resources for domestic violence advocacy centers, and also women's shelters, places where there are hotlines where they can call and get some assistance. We also have our MET team available for people who may have mental health concerns. This data does not specifically extract the mental health concerns that may have affected or may have attributed to the domestic violence. I spoke with our mental health evaluation team to try to find out if they had any specific correlation between domestic violences and mental health concerns. And they confirmed that we do not have a way to specifically extract that data. There have been a handful of cases that they can recount that involved both domestic violence and a mental health concern. And the majority of those were dealing with elderly citizens that were having the initial onset of dementia, where they were aggressive with their partner. And so there was a domestic violence component as well as the dementia part, which falls under the mental health concern. So outside of those handful of cases, we don't have a specific way to extract that data. So this is, I wanted to explain that to you, and that's why I don't have specific statistics for that. Okay? Are there any questions?
Anybody want to jump in? Of course, I've got questions.
Okay.
Or comments. So first off, thank you. This is a regularly, domestic violence is a regularly occurring topic that we address with the commission, and we try to do it around this time of year as we lead into the holidays. And I believe it's also Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Just can't remember if it's that last month or this month. I was actually just at a conference on this. So one of the things that jumped out at me, I'm always interested in the mental health piece of it and everything. It's not law enforcement's job to do social services. And so it doesn't surprise me that there's not a whole lot of data there correlating the two. But anecdotally, I think it's important to know that there is that crossover. So I appreciate your addressing it, and I just want to acknowledge that it's not my expectation that you're going to see a large connection between the two, because again, it's not law enforcement's job to do social services. The data from the pandemic, as we come out of that, I wonder, can we bring that slide back up?
Sure.
Is that
Can we bring
possible?
the PowerPoint back up, please? Okay.
So there's something that I saw in there that just that jumped out at me a little bit, and the next one. Perfect, that's it, right there.
Okay.
So couple of things that I'm seeing is that there is a spike in 2021 as we get into the pandemic. One of the things that I'm aware of is that there's going, because folks are shut in, one of the things that we saw around, for example, child abuse reporting. There was a huge decline in child abuse reporting during the pandemic because the mandated reporters were not with the kids that would be subject to child abuse or suspected child abuse. So something similar may happen here as well. But the fact that there is that spike that we see, I think that's significant. And my guess is that that's representative of actually a larger spike of unreported situations. So I just wanted to lift that up. The one that looks like a minor detail, though, is the use of drugs and alcohol in these cases and everything. And again, we see another spike there. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you capturing the data on that. And it looks, I mean, I'm a social worker, which means I can't do math well, but it looks like there's a significant correlation there, and there's a significant spike as we get into 2021. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to lift that up and appreciate that you teased that out. Those are the comments that I wanted to make on this. I just really appreciate your sensitivity to addressing this, and just acknowledge how hard it is to do this work as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Other comments, Leila?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate you sharing what are the type of resources and supports that people who are experiencing domestic violence receive, when they're interacting with the department, and sharing that on this presentation tonight as well. And, to that end a bit, I'm wondering, in some cases, I know it's complicated sometimes around whether people who are victims of domestic violence feel comfortable, pressing charges or not, or when, charges can be filed without, if and when without their, initiating it. And so also just wondering, in some cases, is there any follow-up or counseling for the people who are the perpetrators of the domestic violence, beyond, arrest and detainment and those kinds of things, to really get at the root of the issue that's going on in the household? Just wondering on that aspect. Yeah.
Yes, I understand your question. Could I please have the PowerPoint up one more time? So just to address your last question about resources for the possible perpetrator, this last resource that I have here that is called Love is Respect, that actually is a resource designed to be targeted towards potential perpetrators. It's geared towards younger people who may find themselves in a situation where they may have to learn how to control their anger or deal with their own emotions in a relationship. So this is a resource that's available to them. Of course, this is something that they would have to seek out on their own. The only time that treatment or counseling can be enforced on someone is when they are going through the prosecutorial process of the courts. And that is also a part of domestic violence cases. There usually is a domestic violence class that is attached to any type of sentence for domestic violence. To address your question regarding whether people can be prosecuted even if the victim is unwilling or unable to cooperate with prosecution, was that your question? Yeah. Okay, so in that case, we are one arm of the law. We are the arm that will go out and enforce the law. We are not the part that deems whether a case is worthy or has enough evidence to be prosecuted. That's going to be up to our city attorney or our district attorney. So anytime we have a violation of law that we can establish, and whether or not we have a victim who's willing to come forward and say, yes, I was a victim of domestic violence. Sometimes that does occur. Sometimes we have a victim who's very willing to explain to us what happened, allow us to take photographs of their injuries. We can find witnesses and talk to them and document it, put a bow on it, and present it to the city attorney or district attorney and move forward and feel confident that that case is very well supported. In other cases, like you mentioned, the victims are not going to be as willing to come forward, whether it's due to fear or just their unwillingness or uncertainty with the whole process. We do have a lot of those victims. That's not going to affect how we handle our cases. If we find enough evidence that the crime occurred, we will make an arrest and we will present that case to either the city attorney or the district attorney. Oftentimes, in a case of domestic violence, we are getting calls from neighbors. We are getting calls from the shopping centers that they're witnessing something in a car. We're getting calls from someone calling 911 and saying, hey, I'm seeing this car driving down the road and someone's getting punched. In those cases, that is evidence which we can use towards our case. When we arrive at the scene and we interview the people, if we find that, hey, this victim actually does have injuries, we're probably going to go ahead and make that arrest, even if that victim may not be as cooperative with information at that time due to fear or unwillingness to participate. So we are going to do our job regardless of what happens on the back end or what may happen on the back end on the prosecution side. We're still going to move forward with everything that we have as investigators. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, thank you. And one other question.
Sure.
I don't know if this is too far afield, but speaking to your the statistics that you shared with us around incidents that involve an apparent use of drugs and alcohol, and unfortunately knowing that sometimes there are firearms involved with domestic violence, and I'm wondering what are the policies or laws around that specifically, where maybe someone is suspected of domestic violence, and that has to be proven through a process, but when the officer's there, either the person says they have a firearm or they have the firearm or it's visible, and they're also intoxicated and they're in this charged situation, whatever's happening. So kind of what is the policy or procedure? What can officers do in that situation relating to the firearm?
Okay, so you're kind of bringing in three aspects of it: a domestic violence component, possible intoxication with drugs or alcohol, and then a firearm component. So the intoxication part of it wouldn't necessarily necessitate our removal of that firearm. But when we have the domestic violence component, the law dictates that we will do a check for firearms. We will ask the people involved if there are firearms in the home. We will conduct a records check to see if they have any firearms registered to them. And if they do, it's incumbent upon us to search for those firearms and collect them per state law. And when we do that, we take those weapons as safekeeping. They're not evidence of any crime, but we are taking them because the history shows us that when there is domestic violence and also weapons involved, it doesn't always turn out well. So we are directed by the law to take those firearms, which we do. Okay, and those owners of those firearms have a process which they can go through to legally get the firearms back. They have to go through the California Department of Justice. There's a whole process that is involved, and it's a legal process, and that is part of our policy and also state law. So we adhere to that.
Burbank?
Thank you, Chair Coombs, and Sergeant Lawford, thank you so much for that presentation.
Sure.
So how are multiple calls made by a specific source handled over time, meaning person calls for a domestic violence, there's an incident that occurs, and another incident that occurs but involves the same source. How does that work as far as like how it's handled at the department? And also as far as the incident report, is that counted as a specific incident? If it's like from one source, is that coupled together, or how does that work?
Now,
Does
just
that
to
make sense?
clarify, do you mean, when you say one source,
Yeah.
do you mean that
one
that source is
individual.
involved in the domestic violence,
No,
or?
meaning like it's coming from, let's say that this wife is calling about an incident that occurred, and then 3 months later calls about another incident that occurred with that specific person, and that kind of carries on over time. Are those all specifically one particular incident, all coupled together, or they're individual incidents that are
Okay.
reported? So,
Okay, and you mean that that wife is saying, hey, I'm a victim of domestic violence, or I
Right.
was involved in an incident with my husband
Correct.
or partner?
absolutely. And
Okay.
then 3 months later, same thing happens.
Sure.
3 months later, same thing happens.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. Each of those is an independent incident. So even if they happen a day apart, they are separate incidents. A separate report will be taken. The same procedures will be followed each time we encounter that situation.
Sure.
No matter how many times we go out for the same type of call, it's always going to be handled with the same process and procedure. In order to try to manage those situations and to better help the people that are involved, there are steps that we can take to try to mitigate the situation a little bit, and that involves the court process. That involves restraining orders, domestic violence restraining orders. There are emergency protective orders, which we can offer to the person at the time of the incident. If they say, yes, I would like an emergency protective order, that is something that we seek right then and there. We have a form that we fill out. We contact a judge or a magistrate by phone, and they will either authorize it or decline it. Most times they get authorized. We complete the form, we provide it to the victim, and then we serve the suspect or the person that needs to be restrained, if at all possible. If they're in custody, if we know where they are or can find them, we will do our best to serve them. So there are multiple things that we can do to try to mitigate the situation, but it's not, ultimately, we don't have control over that situation, and the possibility is that we're going to have multiple contacts with the same people, and we'll do our best to provide them resources and put those orders in place to try to keep the parties separate, but ultimately, we don't have control over it.
Of course, and I really appreciate that. And one last thing. So in comparison to like individual incidents versus incidents that occur from one specific source, like, is there like a percentage, or like, are you guys seeing that it's more common to see reports come from one particular area versus just, completely different isolated incidents? If that makes any sense?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Oh, sure. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, you have a particular person calling about a domestic violence incident, and that person is calling like maybe 4 or 5 times a year, and you guys, of course, are addressing that concern versus just, isolated, like, does that make sense?
Yes. I don't have the statistics for that, but I can
Okay.
tell you that we definitely have our repeat cases. We definitely have those cases come across our desk where we recognize the person by name, we recognize their photograph, because they've been in multiple reports before. So yes, that does occur.
Thank you.
But we also do have those cases where it's a one-time thing, where perhaps someone just happens to be driving through Burbank and they have a domestic violence incident. That becomes our case here, even though the people may not live in Burbank, they may not work in Burbank, they have no nexus to Burbank other than the fact that they just happen to be driving through when the crime occurred. So those become our cases as well, and we're typically not going to have much interaction with that,
Sure.
with those people again. But for the people that live here that are involved in domestic violence incidents, the likelihood is that we're going to encounter them again.
Yeah.
Yes.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Other questions? Mike?
Thank you for your presentation.
Of course.
You mentioned that there's resources that may be available that you can share with the victims. Is that information available online at our website?
Yes, we have information available on our police department website that directs to the mental health and evaluation team. And we also have resources available for shelters and domestic violence hotlines, as well as suicide hotlines. Those resources are also available through the LA County Department of Public Health. So they are readily available on the internet, but they are accessible through our website also.
Good. Another question I have is, in domestic situations, is there ever a need or even a requirement to remove one of the parties? For example, an ex is harassing somebody, a former partner. Except for if the victim has been, say, assaulted or harassed, are you required to take that perpetrator away from the situation?
I can explain that for you. There is a case for both of those situations. The California Penal Code is very specific in what we are directed to do, what we are allowed to do, and the cases in which we can use discretion and where we cannot use discretion. What I mean by that is when Lieutenant Brimway was up here, he was talking about our traffic enforcement. He talked about the officer's ability to use discretion, that the officer might use that as a time to maybe educate the person, and even though they committed the violation, they may not necessarily have to receive a citation. That's an officer's ability to use discretion, which we are legally allowed to do through the California Penal Code. Through the California Vehicle Code. When we start talking about specific crimes, such as domestic violence, our ability to use discretion is not there. The California Penal Code is specific that if we determine the crime of domestic violence has occurred, it's specific to say that we shall arrest. It doesn't say that we can or we should. It says that we shall. So what that means is that if we determine that a domestic violence has occurred and the perpetrator is there, we shall arrest them, which means that we would be removing them from the scene and taking them with us, yes. So that there are cases where that occurs. There are times, however, that we arrive and we may not be able to determine that a crime occurred. We may suspect that there has been domestic violence, but maybe both parties are denying that that's occurred. And they're saying, hey, listen, we had an argument, we had a verbal argument, but there was no physical violence. And even though the neighbors called you and said that they heard us yelling, yes, that did occur, but there was no physical violence. And we're going to do the best to our ability to investigate that. We're going to look around. Does anything appear to be broken or knocked over? No. Does either party appear to have torn or tousled clothing or injuries? And if the answer is no, and we're just unable to find any witnesses or determine that a domestic violence occurred, we're still going to document that incident in a type of report that's not a specific crime report. We're still going to document that. And we may suggest that, hey, listen, you two are having a rough night. We suggest that, maybe one of you go stay with your parents or go stay with a friend, go rent a hotel room. But in that case, we don't have a specific legal authority to remove someone from the scene. Does that answer your question?
It's getting there.
Okay.
If we have, if there's a situation where there is a restraining order, is that breaking the law, that person then would be removed
Yes.
or arrested?
Yes. So they would be arrested if we find that they're in violation of a restraining order.
It's never, a person is just removed, they would be arrested.
If we find that they are in violation of a restraining order, they would be arrested, yes. There are some specific cases, and of course, there's going to be a caveat to almost every situation. I can think of a couple of instances where we've had someone who has so many medical problems that it's prohibitive for us to take them because they can't be housed in a jail facility due to their medical conditions. And they're also not physically able to follow this person that they are restrained from. So it's a matter of restraining them, separating them. It might be a type of situation where we would file the case with the city attorney. We would still take action in that, but it may not always. I don't want to use the term that we would always arrest in that case, but in most cases, yes, we would.
Good. Thank you.
Great. Other comments or questions? I have just two real quick. I'm sorry. Ann, go ahead.
Quick, sorry, thank you.
Of course.
Given what you've said and all the explanations about how to resolve these situations, are the resources enough in the city of Burbank for the demand, the need?
I think that we can always use more resources. I think that we utilize the resources that we have very well. I'm not sure if you have a specific resource that you're asking about.
I guess I would be thinking along the lines, the difference between saying to somebody, okay, scan these things, or here's a card, or we're going to help you call this location right now, as opposed to we can take you over here, or you can arrange for transportation over here right now and be helped.
Depending on the circumstance, both of those things could happen. So there are circumstances where someone is safe. They're in a situation where they are removed from the immediacy of the situation where there's a potential for harm, and we can provide them with information that they can seek. There are other situations where someone is in such a desperate situation that they do need immediate help. They need to be taken to a shelter, or they need to be given a ride, and that's certainly something that in certain scenarios that we will do, that we will assist with. But there are cases where we feel that someone needs help to be removed from that situation, and they don't want our help. So we cannot force it upon them. It's something that we can offer to them, but we can't force them to get in our car and let us take them to a women's shelter or a men's shelter in Van Nuys or LA. They have to be willing to agree to it. So yes, there are situations that would necessitate us offering that to someone and providing it to them, and we do.
Okay. And there's enough, but there could always be more.
Yes, and that's not entirely up to us. A lot of it is dependent upon the agencies which offer those that outreach to the community. Unfortunately, sometimes they don't have room. They don't have available beds. Depending on the circumstance of the person, their age, their sex, if they have children with them, they need to find a compatible room or bed for them, and that's not always available. So sometimes that's out of our hands. That's up to the agencies that offer these services. As far as the city of Burbank, we can always use resources that we can offer to people. In the past, we've had vouchers for hotels, which we've used. We've had bus tokens or vouchers so that someone could get a bus ride if they needed to go somewhere. And I believe those have been limited in recent years. So that would be a decision above my pay grade. That would be something that would come down directly from the chief as far as what resources we would be looking for. But I think that we would probably not turn away any resources that were offered to us.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Work
that.
for us.
So just a couple of, thank you for all of this information. This is extremely helpful. Couple of quick questions. I think I know the answer, but just want to confirm. Is the domestic violence restraining order clinic still available at the Van Nuys Courthouse?
Yes, there
Great.
is a domestic violence restraining order clinic, and those are still being issued, and classes are being offered so that people can learn about them. So yes, that is still available.
Thank you. And the second question is you were talking about a process of, a due process of taking away somebody's firearms, and there's a due process piece, and if they want to get that back. Is that's part of the gun violence restraining order process?
Not always. As if there is a gun violence restraining order that is put into place, then yes, they would have to go through that process through the Department of Justice to retrieve their firearms back. But the retrieval of the firearms does not always necessitate a gun violence restraining order. So they are two separate processes. However, if there is a gun violence restraining order and guns are taken, then yes, they still have to go through that process to get their firearms back.
Has the department ever considered offering information on the gun violence restraining order to potential victims in situations to bring that into the conversation to help empower the victims or potential victims?
That's a good point. I'm not aware that we have any specific information available to them regarding that. However, whenever we encounter someone where they are a victim and we are taking guns, it is discussed with the victim, and the detective afterwards would be following up with them. So I believe I think it's safe to say that there is an educational process that happens, but it may not happen right at the time of the arrest or the incident. It may happen down the road during the investigation.
Great.
And also, one thing I wanted to add, ma'am, to your question before, I did not mention, another part of service to the victims is that if we do have an arrest, a case that's going on, there's also a victim advocate through the district attorney's office that is available to a victim. They can be someone that can sit with a victim during interviews. They can help the victim if they have a financial need. There are services available that the victim advocate can acquire for them. And to access those resources, we don't necessarily have to have a case filed yet, but that is a service that's available through the district attorney's office. So I just wanted to add that to your question.
Any other questions or comments? So I'll bring up for the commission, again, I really appreciate the presentation, Sergeant Laufer, and I appreciate the fact that we're taking this up on an annual basis, because domestic violence is a significant issue that we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help support victims in the community. One of the things I really appreciate about the department is that we often may make just informal recommendations, and I know that the department does wrestle with and explore these things. I don't think there's a need to take a vote on it or anything, but I would like to recommend that just like the way the department provides information around the domestic violence restraining orders and the process for that, just like to make a recommendation that the department consider how to possibly implement providing information about gun violence restraining orders into the conversation wherever it's appropriate. So, any other comments, thoughts, questions? All right, Sergeant Laufer, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
And Chair Coombs, if I may.
Sure.
Just briefly going back to item 1. Briefly going back to item 1, the RIPA reports are available online through the Attorney General's office, just so the public is aware with regards to what we're referencing.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that.
I believe there's a link at our Burbank website, too.
I'm not sure. I think we were going to put it, hold on. Steve, is the RIP report on our website?
Yes, it should be through the training materials. I'll verify.
Okay, we'll verify that, but yes,
Great.
because that's what we sent you folks, the
Yep.
report. Yeah.
Thank you. So we're moving on to item 3, which is a presentation and discussion and recommendations, if applicable, on mailbox thefts, including types of property taken, trends, and patterns of investigative actions. And we have Lieutenant Lusako with us this evening. Lieutenant, welcome.
Good evening.
And
once
welcome
again.
back.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. Good evening, Police Commission. Can I get the slideshow, please? So I've been asked to speak about mail theft, mailbox phishing, if you will, and we'll go through that here tonight. I promise. Sherry?
Brooke did it.
No, come on. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about mailbox phishing and mailbox theft, what it is, how to avoid becoming a victim of mailbox theft. I'll do a couple case studies of a couple recent cases that we've investigated that our investigators have seen through to fruition. We'll talk about some stats, and then obviously we'll do a Q&A. Next slide, please. Oh, I got it. No. What is mailbox phishing? So generally speaking, it's the blue boxes that you see around town in front of the mailbox on corners. It says USPS on it, very bright blue. Those are the mailboxes that we're generally going to be talking about. Although they could also have stolen mail from those gang mailboxes where you may see in apartment buildings in a lobby, or some communities may have 20 mailboxes for 20 residences all in one location. Generally, these folks are, at one point, it was an ingenious way to go. They'd use the rodent glue trap stickers, right? So these rodent traps are very sticky. If you've ever used one, you will open them out of the package, and if you're not careful, that sucker will stick to your hand, and it takes a real difficult time to get it off. So that's what they're using. Attaching some sort of string, rope, belt, anything with length to it, to put it into the mailbox where you normally would drop your mail. Obviously, the mail sticks to that trap. What they're hoping for is to get checks, gift cards, and even cash. Believe it or not, people are still mailing cash in the mail for whatever reason. But those are generally the things they're trying to get. They will then alter the checks. There's a variety of ways. That goes into a whole other topic, but a variety of ways to alter the checks and then cash them, deposit them, may have whatever they want to do with them. And then, of course, gift cards. People will send gift cards in the mail. Those gift cards, once they are received, are just as good as cash. You lose them. Once they're out of your hand and someone's using them, they're just as good as cash. A lot of ways you can avoid it. I've actually had Lieutenant Green, who you've met with, put this on the website for us today, and Sergeant Turner helped with that. So this exact slide's on the website as of this afternoon, but some of the things you can do is don't put your mail in the blue mailbox. Bring it into the post office. Hand it to your friendly postman. If you do have to put it in the mailbox, don't put it in after the last pickup, right? Because then that means, by definition, it's going to stay overnight. And this is generally speaking when these folks are targeting these mailboxes overnight. So if all these mailboxes say last pickup at such and such a time, or the schedule of pickups, if it's 5 o'clock, if you can help it, don't put the mail in there at 6:30, because it's going to stay there till 7 or 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. A couple of case studies. So these are both very recent cases. This one's from the summertime in June. We received a call to our police dispatch. Officers were dispatched out to the 300 block of North Glen Oaks up here on the hill. And this car was described with this suspect. At the scene, the suspect was identified through his license plate as being the owner of the car. A few days later, we served a search warrant at his home where mail stolen from Burbank and other communities was located, to include these rat trap deals, and that case was filed with the DA's office. So what I really want to highlight there is a community member called the police department, saw something that they clearly saw was not okay, and it helped us capture somebody that was stealing, you or your neighbor's mail. Back in September, so just a couple months ago, at the end of September, Verdugo and Florence, 12 o'clock at night, again, overnight hours, under the cover of darkness. We get another call from dispatch. Our officers got there, saw the car, but the car fled and did not stop for the officers. The car fled in such a fashion that we did not chase it, and no license plate was obtained. So on the 24th and 26th, looking back at surveillance footage in the area, we learned that this same suspect had done the same thing. So now we have September 24th, September 26th, and then the call was on the 27th. This same person was doing the same thing. Then we get reports on October 11th and 22nd, same mailbox, same suspect. So you'll see there, he just retrieved his tool of the trade. He's opening up the mailbox, slipping the trap inside, and then you see there the fruits of his effort are your mail. And this goes on for a little bit, gets in the car, and he leaves with the mail. The neighbor that we got this surveillance footage from was so irritated that this happened, I don't know, half a dozen times nearly. He went and purchased his own very high resolution 4K cameras, which allowed us to get a license plate. You'll notice that I blurred out the license plate here. This case has not been adjudicated, but we were able to read the license plate on that last video, which then led us to identifying the plate. We put that out to our patrol officers on November 6th. Patrol officer located that vehicle on two separate occasions, what we believe to be about to do the same thing or had just done the same thing, but he fled. Because of the type of crime, we did not chase that suspect. On November 8th, our investigators located the suspect in his car. We initiated a surveillance. We watched him go to a bank where he went inside and he cashed a check that he had stolen out of the mailbox, and we arrested him shortly thereafter. And that case is pending a review by the district attorney's office. The cases that we have reported in 2022 are 31, and then year-to-date 17. What I will stress to you is these are simply reported cases. This is not indicative of how often this crime is actually occurring, because at the end of the day, all you really know is that you put a check in the mail or a gift card in the mail, and the intended recipient never got it. Somebody else has likely then altered it, and then your $1,000 check has miraculously become a $7,000 check, and you find out because you're out that money that it was stolen. You don't know if it was stolen from this mailbox, if it was stolen in transit, if it was stolen at delivery. So these numbers are just not indicative of how often this is actually happening. And with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, we'll go ahead and open it up. Mike, you want to start?
Thank you for your report. I'm curious how the jurisdiction works, with mail being federal and.
That's a great question. So generally speaking, the United States Postal Service does have a law enforcement arm, but they are not going to be interested in taking over our cases unless there is significant loss that we can attribute to one individual or a group of individuals, or there's physical force used in the taking of the mail. So we've had a few cases where a postman was robbed, physically assaulted or threatened, and mail was taken. And in those cases, they become a little bit more interested. But on these just run-of-the-mill cases where someone's taking mail and then doing identity theft at the end of the day is what it really is. They're not interested in prosecuting them, so we end up having those prosecuted through the DA's office or through our city attorney's office.
So it would be, they could be charged with theft by state law.
They can be charged with theft if we can show that we know that this gentleman here, that like I showed you in the video, absolutely theft from the mailbox. But quite often, we don't know where the mail was taken from. He may have taken it from a mailbox. What we have is the actual possession of other people's identifying information or their checks, and those can be charged, generally speaking, the identity theft realm. Or possession of stolen property, if you will. But the actual theft from the mailbox requires a very specific set of circumstances that we need to prove that they actually took it from the mailbox as a theft.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mike, go ahead.
In Burbank, is it a problem of apartment houses, their mailboxes being broken into?
That does happen, like I mentioned earlier, the gang mailboxes where there might be 10, 20, 30, 50 of those mailboxes, they are definitely broken into as well, yes.
During election years, are election ballots ever stolen in Burbank?
I don't have any, off the top of my head, recollection of that happening or any reports of that happening. As you might imagine, it's difficult to know, once you put that envelope in the box, if it doesn't make it to its destination, it's very difficult to know where in transit, from the time it was deposited until the time it's supposed to show up, wherever it's going to show up, where it was actually taken.
Thank you.
So I'm recalling from the civilian academy that's provided. I remember there was a lot of discussion about confiscating keys and everything to access that. So community academy, thank you. So I'm familiar with that. Something jumped up at me as I was watching this. I just connected a couple of dots. Through my employer, I've been getting they give us notifications of things we should be on the lookout for, and I guess there's something on the rise of something called check washing, which is what you were describing. I'm wondering, I don't know if can we talk about that in relation to this, because the connection I'm making is that check washing is a crime that's probably taking place because of mail theft.
If that's the connection, I think you're on point.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind touching bases on that a little bit.
So sure, like I said, the mail is stolen. They're hoping that there's going to be checks in the mail, and then those checks are going to be altered with different payees and different amounts. If you have a check that you send for $50, miraculously that check is now going to be worth $500 or $5,000 to a different person. So yeah, I mean that's been going on for a long, long time. I mean, any time since we've had checks, that has been an issue. And there's different sophistication levels. So sometimes they look really, really good, and generally someone's not going to see that it was altered. Other times, not such a good job, and you would hope that somebody that is dealing with that check would recognize, you know what, this doesn't look right, let me make a phone call, or let me make sure that this is the actual intent where this check's supposed to be cashed.
Lieutenant Sacco, I appreciate you addressing that. Romek, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Lieutenant Sacco. I appreciate the presentation. I agendized this because the Burbank Chamber of Commerce, my office is located there, was a victim of mail theft. We got phone calls about, members and people just saying that we just never got our check. And, Krista Peltier, detective, she's fantastic. She was able to help the chamber in that process. And, and this is something that we constantly see all throughout the community. And I just recently had a conversation with a friend who owns a hotel here in Burbank, who was also a victim of mail theft, and was for a large check that somehow ended up in Alabama, and they found out that it was a United States postal worker who was responsible for that, so the FBI got involved. So we're understanding that this is definitely a concern, and when it comes to these incidents that are reported, I mean, we're just depending on the community to reach out and let us know this is happening, right? Is that what we're saying, or how has that information come about? Well, certainly, this is a crime that we generally would not know is happening unless somebody calls us and lets us know that they've been victimized. A caveat to that is if we make a traffic stop, going back to some of the presentation we had earlier today, a lot of times we will find stolen mail in the possession of folks that are driving through our community as part of a search that started with a traffic stop. And we'll find it's not normal that if I stopped you driving your car, that you would have mail belonging to 15 or 20 other people at 10 or 12 different addresses. Now, there might be a reason that that's the case, right? But for the most part, you're going to have some explaining to do. And if you can't explain it, you're in violation of identity theft because you've possessed that material. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments?
Just to say, thank you for sharing that. I hadn't heard about this, and that it's probably about a year ago. In our family, we had sent a check for something, and ended up being cash. On the bank, you can log in and see the picture of the check, and it was altered, and someone had, I don't think they'd changed the amount, thankfully, but they had cashed the check, and we were just wondering, well, how did it get to that, this other person? It was addressed correctly and all these things, and so now I'm wondering, if it was related. And the place we needed to send the check was relatively close by, so maybe next time we'll just drop it off rather than
That's really the best
put
thing
it
you
in
could
the
do
mail.
is drop it off, or like I say, go inside of the post office and drop it off. The chances of it being stolen are reduced to almost nothing once, unless you have the internal theft, that's going to be a different topic. But for the most part, you're not going to get your mail stolen if you bring it inside the post office.
Appreciate that. Mike?
Also, electronic checking is the best way to go.
Ann?
Quick question, thank you. Once you may find an alleged person who has done this, is there a certain amount of money that you have to find in checks or credit cards before they can be charged? Does this come up against all the felony?
Misdemeanor.
Certainly. So one piece of mail that you cannot account for is a violation of the law. There is a penal code section that says if you have over 10, it automatically is a felony. So, and you have to find the 10 pieces of mail for it to be probable cause to make the arrest. But the DA's office will not file the case unless we actually make contact with those victims, because at some point, theoretically, somebody would have to come to court and testify that this is me, this person didn't have possession or the right to have my mail, and so on and so forth. So it becomes difficult to get there sometimes. But to answer your question, one piece of mail is enough, but the 10 is the felony cutoff, if you will, in this case.
So it's not necessarily regarding if there was a credit card in it or a check, it's the actual mail that does not belong to that person?
Correct, for that code. Now, if they're stealing stuff that is valuable, there is just the theft part of that, or the possession of stolen property, which is the $950 threshold that we have talked
Right.
about several times for a misdemeanor felony, which doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be filed as a misdemeanor felony, but that is what we can arrest for.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a random thought that I'm really hoping that if somebody's engaging in mail theft, I'm hoping that junk mail counts for that number 10 is the magic number, but I'm guessing
Usually it says
probably
resident
doesn't.
on it, right?
Yeah, that's what I figured. That's what I figured. If there are no other questions or comments, or if there's no other recommendations, Lieutenant Lasaka, we really appreciate your time this evening, and thank you for the presentation.
My pleasure, thank you.
So the next thing we have up is general announcements by the police chief, brief announcements regarding upcoming events and/or items of note related to the police department. Chief?
So items of note to the police department, it was discussed earlier, so if you're hearing or speech impaired, we have systems in place to accept those calls. So we have the California Relay for the impaired, and we also have the TDD devices, telephone device for the deaf, and we also have other relay systems in the event someone is impaired as far as being able to communicate with them. That population understands that as far as what services and resources are available for them. In fact, we did a community meeting, Kevin Kremens and I, where a community academy specifically for the hearing impaired. And it was an opportunity for us to get feedback from them as far as what their needs were and where we're falling short, and experience the community academy. So I don't know of any other agency in the region that has done that, but to your point, not to worry. Also, Next Generation 911, which is going to be a pretty sophisticated system, will be able to accommodate any special needs as far as communicating with a 911 operator. So, some notable dates. I want to thank all the folks that were at Matthew's ceremony today. It was a tough one to get through. That was 20 years ago today, and I just thank the commissioners that were there, and I thought the ceremony was just well done. So to community members, if you have a chance to see the memorial in Johnny Carson Park, please stop by. We have Holiday in the Park this Friday, And the only reason I share that with you is that the police department will have what we call a static display. So we'll have the Bearcat out there, we'll have K9, and we'll have our kind of a recruitment effort. Captain Cornelius and I will do about 2 or 3 laps there. So that's this Friday night, I believe, is from 5 to 9 p.m. So if you are available, we'll see you out there. We also participate in the Toys for Tot campaign. So we have a number of our officers that are currently reserves. So this is associated with the 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marine Group that's based out in Pasadena. And we have, not only do we do it internally, we have donation boxes in the lobby. So if there's folks that are looking for a place to donate toys, we have it there. Just to remind everybody, because December we're dark, gun buyback December 9th, and it'll be from 9 a.m. to 12, rain or shine. And then we have Shop with Burbank Blue on Thursday, December 14th. So it's a collaboration between or amongst, Mrs. Berg would be upset with me as far as my grammar, I can't remember, between or amongst. Burbank Police Foundation, Walmart, BPOA, Kiwanis, Rotary, Burbank Housing Association. So that will be on the 14th at what time?
14th from 5 to 7 p.m.
5 to 7 p.m. So we'll send something out to remind you if you're so inclined or want to swing by. So there's going to be a sea change for the Burbank Police Department, and it's going to be a significant sea change. So it's really bittersweet for the organization, and certainly for myself, is that our police administrator, Courtney Paget, got promoted to assistant city manager. So that's beyond well done. So what it speaks to is the behind-the-scenes work that she does to make sure that we're on schedule with everything. And you've heard me say before is that I sometimes have to defer to her because she writes the checks. So she has the power of the checkbook. But this is a big deal for her. It's a big deal for our department because we have a large void. So congratulations to Courtney. This is a big deal. ACM is number 2. I am now in a subordinate role to someone who subordinated to me. So in December, the roles are reversed. But here's the good news. Viviana Garzon is going to be, we have selected her to replace Courtney. Viviana, you see at City Council. She typically sits right there. She's the one behind the scenes that manages the proclamations, the presentations. She does the agendas. She is very conversant with the city operations. And we believe that she's going to do a fine job. So for the organization, it is a big sea change, and just wanted to share that with you. Celebrate, lift up Courtney in her new position. So.
Looking forward to being the chief.
Congratulations.
And that's all I have.
So Chief, it was on paper that Ms. Paget was subordinate to you, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I'm clear about that. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
We all understand that.
Yeah.
We all know that. We all know that.
Anyhow, that's all I have to report out, so thank you for your time.
Thank you again, and congratulations. So moving on to item H, it's introduction of agenda items for future meetings. And as we go into this, I just want to note, I'd mentioned earlier that I was doing a review of agendas and minutes for the past 3 years or so in preparation for tonight. I just want to note that there was a shift at some point where we moved from typically 2 agenda items that were significant discussions. We started adding in 3. I just want to make sure that folks are aware, because sometimes there's a question about the time and how that's all connected. So as we plan out our agendas, I want to make sure you're all aware of that. So we have a couple of things. There's already something agendized for January, and that is the presentation and discussion on the city's 2035 general plan and how it relates to BPD. That's already been agendized. That's ready to go. There are 2 items that are on our dashboard right now. One is the DUI enforcement, which we've traditionally done in January, and the second is the military equipment report discussion. And if I can ask for some clarification before we have this discussion on this for agenda items, are we also doing a public public forum on the military equipment report in January?
So, yes and no, but I'm actually going to direct Police Administrator Paget to brief you on that. So I can direct her for about another 2 or 3 weeks, and then because there is a timing issue, there's compliance dates, and there's community meetings. So I'll defer to Courtney.
Thank you. Good evening. Courtney Paget with the Police Department. So what we're planning to do this year is follow the model that we established last year. So this will actually be our 3rd year of doing the annual report. We did the inaugural year, and then last year was kind of our first repeat and community meeting and all of that is required by AB 481. So what we did last year was we published the report the same night as the Police Commission meeting in January. We presented the report to the Police Commission for your review and feedback, and then we held a community meeting adjacent to the February Police Commission meeting. So we held it over at the Community Services Building in room 104. We held the community meeting so that allowed everyone a month for the public to review the report in preparation for the meeting. We had the public meeting with you all were present, and with another presentation for the public's sake of the annual report. Then we immediately followed that meeting with the regularly scheduled February meeting of the Police Commission. And then we have until it's April 26th of each year to present the final report back to council. So right now, the tentative plan would be for us to complete the annual report at the beginning of the year. We'll publish it publicly, present it to the Police Commission for your review and feedback, then plan the community meeting probably in February, but it could go to March. But right now, I think we're looking at February, and then that way we can get it on the council agenda for approval before the April 26th deadline.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Mike, go ahead.
Oh, just real quick, by the history that we had last year, is it necessary for us to go to the community building?
For a community meeting, I think as far as availability and just access for, more members to come and to be more of a, this is a little bit more of a formal setting. So to try to make it a little more conversational and to, engage in dialogue with community members, we preferred to have it in that setting. But I'm sure we can discuss if that's the most appropriate environment for that
Yeah,
meeting.
and there was an availability. There was a
Yeah.
conflict last year because we were competing with someone else. So we switched positions. So I understand the ask, because we did have about a half dozen folks that
Yeah,
showed up.
we did, and we discussed at one point having it at the police station, but to make it a little more, again, more comfortable and conducive, we thought getting it out of the police station would be a good environment. There are limited, places to hold that kind of meeting in the city where you can broadcast it and have public comment, call in and all of that. And since we did it adjacent to the police commission meeting, that was the most viable option. But we could entertain other locations if that were the.
And if I recall, I believe we ran into, I remember there was a last minute issue where I think the commission actually has to call and agendize that meeting. Does anybody recall that, where there was an issue about making sure that we'd formally called it? So I'm wondering if we may want to consider agendizing both.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting the way we did it, because it really wasn't a police commission meeting. It was the police department's community meeting that we
Right.
held just in partnership with the police commission, and then you held your separate meeting, where at your meeting, you basically approved the
Right.
report and supported it for council to pass it. I do remember there being
Yeah.
an issue with the doors, something about
So-
the doors and access.
No,
but
it was a Gina O issue.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a Brown Act issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was
Because all
something-
of you are there, so
Yes.
that's why
Yeah.
it was.
So that's when we did the introduction and handed it off to you, where you did the oversight of the meeting.
Okay.
So we'll try to clean that up. I think we were fine with the model that we had last year, but to Ms. Nakamura's point, it was a Brown Act issue. Gina got involved, and we were able to be in compliance, but we have time, and we'll figure that out.
Okay. I just want to make sure, if that's a meeting, something that the commission needs to call, or does the department call that meeting?
Yeah, we can review with the city attorney's office to
Yeah,
make
we
sure
have-
we have that in line before we do the meeting.
Okay.
We have
we'll-
to have a community meeting a special meeting. There's parlance that they use.
Right.
But we'll fine tune that. That's a good pick-me-up.
And
Thank you.
we have January to do that in preparation for February, which
Correct.
will work out great.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted, for folks that were involved in that, that'll help out with that. So with that then, I'd like to go ahead and motion to agendize the military equipment report discussion for January for the commission. So I would need a second on that. Mike Ellman seconds. Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? So it's unanimous. So we've got that one. And so for the second item, I'll leave it open for whoever would like to go down that path.
Chair Combs.
Yes.
Oh, just a comment. I noticed on the future items, I think we had agendized a report, or they had a report back in April in regards to the encryption of the radios.
It is. There was, I think the department was going to work on something, and then we were going to have a discussion outside of the
Yeah.
meeting prior to agendizing that. So
Got
we
it.
we can circle back with the
Oh, yeah,
department to
yeah, right,
confirm that.
perfect.
Does
I
that
appreciate
sound
it.
right?
Does that sound right?
I'm looking at Captain Cremens on that one, because I remember you were involved in that conversation. This is about a future agendizing a future item related to data encryption with the radio systems.
I believe so.
Okay. So we'll circle back on that, and we'll hold on it for right now to confirm, and then we'll come back to that one. So there is a second item on the dashboard if somebody wants to agendize that or motion that. Yeah, it's the DUI piece.
Okay, I'll motion to add the DUI enforcement, around the holidays time, to the January agenda.
Great. So we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I'm going to go with Mike because I saw his hand first. And then so Mike seconds that. All in favor?
Wait, can I just
Oh.
make sure that that is just stats, or, because you just said around the holiday time with DUI, so something more specific.
Clarify the DUI enforcement piece. See, you just walked right into that one. So just for clarification on what the agenda item is.
Yes. Report on, statistics and what enforcement was taken around DUI during, let's say, from, around Thanksgiving through New Year's.
Sound reasonable? Chief, is that okay?
Yeah, that works. Departmental strategies as it relates to DUI enforcement during the holidays, and then I would put an asterisk in there, pre and post holidays, what our posture is. I'm going to ask that the 2035 be pushed. We're not even close to being ready on that.
Okay.
Not even close.
Okay.
So if we can just stay with those two big ones.
So we'll come back to that in a second. We'll finish up this agenda
Got it.
item, and then we'll jump into that.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
So for clarification,
The enforcement and policy and
And
strategy, and then kind of trends, statistics, data around that.
For DUIs.
Yes, thank
Great.
you.
I will second it.
and I have
or
a second.
third it.
I will have a second to that one. All in favor, say aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's unanimous as well. So then the third piece is we have it agendized right now, and so the ask is that we move this from an agendized item to a future item. This is the presentation and discussion of the city's 2035 general plan and how it relates to the Burbank Police Department. So I think what we're looking for is a motion and a second to move that to the future items list. Mike, we've got a
Since
Mike.
that's my.
Perfect.
agenda, I will motion to move that to our future agenda list.
Perfect. And we have a second. Romick seconds. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Great. Okay, so we have two items on the agenda for January. Just wanted to lift that up to make sure folks are aware. Do we have any other recommendations for January agenda items? Mike?
Not for January, but maybe March, April timeframe. I would like an update on the strategic plan, where we are on it, and what's been accomplished, and what's still a work in progress.
Great. And to clarify that motion, I believe the last strategic plan presentation was in 2021. Is that correct? Mike, is that the report in front of you?
No, this is the 23
That's the 23.
To 25, that we're pretty much through 23,
Oh, okay.
and let's get a look going backwards to what we accomplished in 2023
So you'd like to revisit the 23 to 25 report?
In terms of where we're at its implementation.
Okay, so the motion is a status report on the 2023 to 2025, was it the strategic plan?
Strategic
Plan report put together by the Burbank Police Department. Okay, so I have a motion, do I have a second? I'll second that. Okay, do we have, all in favor? Say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? All right, so that would be the third item. And you said this one was for the future list, clarifying for the future list. So any other agenda items for January? Mike?
Oop, you got January in there.
No.
Future.
Future item, okay. What do you got?
I'd like the annual Ripper report, I believe, comes out in January for the year before, or 2 years before. So I'm wondering if we should plan sometime in the winter or early spring as a part of our future to review that report.
So the motion is to do, I don't want to cut off the motion process. So the motion is to do that. I'm probably going to open this one up for a brief discussion as to why not. But we have a motion to put the Ripper report on the future agenda item list. Do we have a second? Mike, we have a second?
No, I'm not second.
You want to discuss?
Point of discussion?
So we were not there yet. Do we
Okay.
have a second? If we don't have a second, there's no need to discuss. So that's why I wanted to check with that. So it doesn't look like we have a second. So that is something, we can have these conversations outside to talk about that, to prepare for that. And as I mentioned in the presentation earlier, we're definitely going there with the Ripper report in the future. That's going to be a part of our business that we do on an ongoing basis. So I guarantee it will not get lost.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Any other agenda items for January? All right. With that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to adjourn this meeting in recognition of Officer Matthew Pavelka, who began his watch on August 5th. One more time? Okay. Before we get backing up for a moment. So the next meeting date, thank you. The next meeting date is Wednesday, January 17th, 2024. At 6 p.m. right here in the City Council chamber. We will be dark December 2023, so I'm wishing everybody a good and safe holiday season. And with that, I'd like to adjourn this meeting in recognition of Officer Matthew Pavelka, who began his watch on August 5th, 2002. End of watch was on November 15th, 2003. Thank you.